Welcome back to the channel. Hopefully everything's going fairly smooth. Uh, my name's John Alsterbrook. Most folks just call me Big John. It's a lot simpler. I guess in a formal setting you could call me Brother Big John, but Big John will suffice. As Papa used to say, you can call me anything as long as you call me to supper. We're getting ready to start our homework. So, in looking at that, what we're going to look at is the 4 rules of firearm safety. And what the 4 rules of firearm safety is, this again, you've heard me discuss Colonel Cooper before. This is something he came up with, and people look at it as range rules. It was not developed for the range. It was actually developed for combat. But there's 4 rules. You will learn these rules. You'll write them on your heart. You'll have them on your forehead, and you'll have them on the doorpost or lintels of your house. You abide by these 4 rules, you will never have an issue. Actually, you can probably break a couple of them and still get by, but I wouldn't push it. The first rule of firearm safety is we treat all guns as if they're loaded. Now, are all guns loaded? No. I mean, you may have just cleared your weapon because you're going to perform maintenance on it. You may be fixing to do your dry fire practice. There's a myriad of reasons it may be unloaded. But you treat it as if it was loaded. You don't play with it. It's not a play pretty. It is a tool. The Gurkhas from Nepal, some of the British Army's famous warriors, have a blade called a kukri, and it's kind of a crooked knife. Every time they take it out, they say they cannot sheath it unless it draws blood. So they may do nothing but prick their thumb to draw blood before they put their kukri back in their sheath. I'm not saying that you got to draw blood with your weapon, but that's the way we should treat our weapon. It is a tool. Again, it's not a play pretty. You treat it like a tool, no problems. You start getting lax with it because it was unloaded, that's how folks get hurt. And the famous last words were, "I thought it was unloaded." Wrong answer. You always treat it like it's loaded. Second, you do not let your muzzle cover anything you're not willing to destroy. So what that means is, and we'll go over the ready positions in another video, but you're cognizant of where your muzzle is pointed. If a round touches off, you want it to go into a safe direction, into a safe backstop, maybe into the ground, wherever. But you're not pointing it at something that you don't care about losing. So we're not waving it around, we're not flagging, we're not sweeping people with our muzzle. Now, when we do individual movement techniques later, you may inadvertently sweep the legs of your battle buddy. You probably won't, but there is a possibility, but it's for just a split second of time. And if we're taking care of the other 3 rules, it won't be an issue. So there's no reason to get in a big fight and all that, just because you got swept. But we don't want to just walk around willy-nilly and the muzzle going everywhere. The third is your finger stays off the trigger till you've made the conscious decision to fire. Now, what I like to do personally, now you can keep your finger to extension on the side of your weapon, outside the trigger guard. Myself personally, I like to have a register point on the weapon, that instead of just laying my finger beside it, I actually push just slightly, just a little bit of pressure against that register point. The reason being, there's a thing called sympathetic response. If you've ever fallen, and as I get older, it takes me 30 minutes to fall. When I was a kid, you fell in a split second, jump back up. Now I swear it takes an hour to hit the floor or the ground, and it takes another hour to get up. But the sympathetic response is, as you begin to fall, every muscle in your body contracts. Well, if your finger is on that trigger, it contracted. If the weapon's loaded, which we must assume it always is, that muzzle, you got to be careful about it. If the muzzle is okay, your ready position's okay, You know, that round goes off, it's embarrassing, but there's no harm, no foul. But still, ideally, we want to abide by the 4 rules. So keep your finger off till you've made a conscious decision to fire. Take care of your business, finger comes off again. The last rule is you have to know your target, what's in front of it, what's behind it. We have to have clear fields of fire. Your round may not stay in the threat, be it human, animal, whatever. It may go through. If you have a family member, a loved one, or an innocent bystander, whatever, on the other side of the threat, and your round goes through, or heaven forbid you missed, and it goes into a family member, that's not a good thing. So you may have to shift your position to where you have a clear field of fire. This is a huge issue in our churches. There's really nowhere good to sit in a church where you have a good clear field of fire. Where I sit at our church, where the sound equipment is, I'm in the back right. But everybody on the left side of the church, if the threat comes up the middle aisle or the far left aisle, I have people in front of the threat or behind the threat. Now, if it comes in the right aisle, I don't have anything but an outside wall, so I'm good there. But I really don't have a good clear field of fire. I got little spots that I could take a shot. So what we may have to do is address our elevation. So we may increase our elevation where we're shooting down into the target, where if it goes through the target, it goes into the floor. Or we may decrease our elevation where we're shooting up into the target, so that if the round goes through the target or we miss, it goes into the ceiling. But we're not hitting innocent bystanders. If we're looking at what's in front of the target, this is why we shoot both eyes open. We have to be situationally aware. We may not realize that there's an innocent bystander or a non-threat that's moving laterally that's going to cross in front of the threat as we engage the threat. So, those 4 rules. You live by those 4 rules, no issues. You can probably break a couple of them and get by. If you see me sometime, ask me about the bathtub, But it's not the way I would want to live. As John Wayne used to say, life's hard and it's harder when you're stupid. Well, I've lived that most of my life. So now we're going to start to address dry fire just a little bit, because we're going to do a video on our dry fire practice on the next video. But a few things we're going to talk about, and we'll address it again, is when we do our dry fire, as long as you are not shooting a 22 rimfire, 22 long rifle, 22 short, you can dry fire all day long, no issues. It's not going to harm your weapon at all. With prices nowadays, availability of ammunition sometimes, it's an excellent way to get your practice in. In Rhodesia, back in the 70s and during the Bush War, basically they had UN sanctions. They couldn't get anything. One of the firearms instructors had his recruits coming through, and he took one group that did live fire. He took another group, and they did nothing but dry fire. So they built their firing positions, trigger control, and never fired a round. At the end of the training evolution, when they fired for score, for record, the group that dry fired actually scored higher than the group that live fired, because they were able to spend more trigger time on their weapons because they weren't limited to a small number of rounds. So this is why we dry fire. Also, some of the things that recoil and the concussion of the weapon will cover cannot be hid when you dry fire. If you snatch the trigger, you're going to see it in the sights. So that's what we're going to do. The main thing is you're going to verbally state, I am beginning my dry fire practice. You're going to clear your weapon. All your ammunition goes into another room. What I would like y'all to do is 5 minutes of dry fire 5 days a week. You get Sunday off for church, Wednesday night you get off for prayer meeting. Otherwise, 5 minutes every night. With the caveat that practice does not make perfect. perfect practice makes perfect. If you're doing your dry fire and your mind starts to wander and you're losing your concentration, rather than getting that last repetition, go ahead and stop. I would rather you do 2 minutes of perfect repetitions than 5 minutes of sloppy. Because if you do 5 minutes of sloppy, you're going to learn bad habits that you're going to have to unlearn. So let's do 5 minutes if we can. But again, if you catch yourself and you're losing concentration, go ahead and stop. Then I verbally want you to say, I'm ending my dry fire practice now. Go ahead and charge your weapon, make it ready. This keeps you from taking that one last round, that one last dry fire repetition that you are going to take after you just loaded your weapon and you put a hole in the TV or the bathtub. So when we're talking about errors, most of them I have learned. So learn from me, don't learn them yourself, okay? So that's where we're going to stop. I appreciate your time. I hope these have been valuable to you. Again, comments, questions, criticism, witticism, go in the comment section. If I can help you, I'll help you any way I can. And as always, I remain your humble and obedient servant, John Alsterbrook. Good night.